It seems to me that this player right here is actually becoming one of the very best Protoss players in StarCraft 2. Every time that I see him compete and whenever he plays Protoss, he seems to be getting a little bit better. And honestly, this is one of my favorite storylines in StarCraft 2 over the last couple of years. Because spawning right here in the top left-hand corner of Stargazers, playing with the red Protoss probes from Italy, we have one of the world's greatest Zerg players, and his name is Reynor. Now today's opponent, in the top right of this map, playing here with the blue Zerg drones. One of the all-time greatest Zergs as well, we have none other than Dark. Dark is on absolute fire right now, he's looking incredibly strong, so I'm excited to find out exactly what ended up going down between these two, because apparently this is an amazing match. Dark already, though, seems a little bit concerned, right? So he goes for a 17 hatch on the low ground, but he does scout pretty far ahead. You really only do that when you're worried for a bunch of proxy gateways on your side of the map. None of that is happening, though. I'm not entirely sure how familiar Dark is with Reynor's Protoss playstyle. Most of the time, whenever pro gamers play their off races, they play relatively cheesy, but Reynor has just been playing macro pretty much every single game that I've seen him play. Maybe he's been whipping out some Protoss cheese as well, I'm not entirely sure, but most of the time, at the very least, he seems to be keen to just play that macro game. Now, I'm gonna sound like a bit of a Reynor fanboy, so bear with me while this game develops, just because I think it's incredibly impressive. So remember a couple of years ago, right? Well, a couple of years, maybe like 5, 6, 7 years ago. It was like front page news in the StarCraft 2 community whenever a non-Korean made it into the Korean Grandmaster League ladder. Now within Grandmaster League, there's 200 ranks, and the difference in skill between the rank 200 and the rank 1 is staggering. So in order to get into Grandmaster League, you need about 5,000 MMR, depending on the server, depending on the time of the season. However, the very best players in the world are sitting at above 7,000 MMR, right? So within those couple hundred ranks, there's thousands of points of difference, and honestly, the skill difference is staggering. Now, anyways, this wasn't even really front page news anymore, apparently, on the StarCraft subreddit at the very least. But Reynor, a couple of days ago, ended up reaching Grandmaster League rank 1 over in South Korea. Moreover, his Protoss is in the top 10. Isn't that wild? I think that's pretty insane. Now, in case you're wondering, why is Reynor playing on the Korean server? He's actually playing in the GSL code S. So he's participating in that. I believe he's moved over to South Korea for at least a couple of months. So he's getting some insane practice in right now. And, well, so far it seems to be paying off as he's looked very strong over the last couple of casts that I've done. He's living in a house together with a bunch of other pro gamers. So, pretty sick. I mean, that's one of the very best ways to get better at StarCraft 2, right? When you're living in a home with other pro gamers as well. When you watch other people practice all the time, you discuss the game all the time over dinner, and, you know, every single moment that you're awake, you're basically thinking about StarCraft. Even though it may not sound entirely healthy, it's a very good way to get very good at the game, and it seems that Reynor, despite the fact that he's already very good, has decided to live in that team environment once again, which is, yeah, pretty exciting. Anyhow, I'm excited to see what ended up going down between these two. So like I said, this is, well, supposed to be an amazing game. We'll find out together. Dark, very fun player to watch. One of my absolute favorites. This guy is one of the very scariest macro players on the planet, and yet he likes to go for some aggressive builds. I featured him in yesterday's video as well, and he ended up going for like a roach push, but he's been going for a lot of very aggressive styles just to force the opponent out of the game. So Lara's coming up right here, pre-4 minutes. That's actually rather early. Oracle goes into the main base. Reynor sees the timing of the Lara, so that's really nice for him. He's already working on the minerals right here on that in-game or in-base expo. Yeah, that's a pretty quick third Nexus, about 4 minutes into the game. We've got that Nexus coming up. I wonder if seeing that timing on the lair is gonna throw him off at all. Nah, probably not. He's probably just gonna go into the Forge and then a Twilight Council, although he's actually skipping the Forge. So normally we see the lair a little bit later here from Zergs. Then again, this is Dark, right? So I've tried studying Dark's replays in the past. Dark is one of the craziest Zergs to study. While I'm sure he likes to play with, like, timings and all that in mind as well, this guy, when he's doing the same build 7 times in a row, hits at a different timing every time, and he definitely does not start up the structures at the most appropriate time ever. Like, it's kind of wild. Like, when you watch someone like, for example, Serral play, it's incredibly rigid. Everything is lined up to the second, and everything, okay, it's coming up at the most opportune time possible Dark, however, plays a little bit more free-flowing, right? He definitely does not mind, just feeling his way through a game, I suppose. Anyways, he's gonna go for a Nydus Network. Now, this is a very, very quick Nydus Worm. It's just gonna be Queens and Zerglings, if I'm not mistaken, okay. So, having that Void Ray out, so I think we saw 2 Oracles into a Void Ray. It's not very common, but I think it's actually gonna be quite helpful. So, this Overlord over here is in a little bit of trouble. Obviously, in order to go for a Nydus Worm, you actually need to have vision of the place where you want to be putting down the Nydus Worm. So, okay. Very first worm is going to go down over here. Honestly, this movement, even though he hasn't seen the network, this movement here would make me a little bit suspicious. I mean, obviously, I know what's going on in this game. He doesn't realize that there's a Nydus Worm over here. There's drones in the network as well, so that's pretty sweet. He could go for a couple of Spine Crawlers or Spore Crawlers, whatever he pleases. Yeah, it's gotta be Spines. So we've got a Spine Crawler rush right here from Dark against Reynor's Protoss. Reynor does have a little bit of time, because obviously those structures take a while to finish. There's a lot of Zerglings available too. It's just gonna be Blink Stalker, I guess? I mean, that Blink is not done even remotely yet, right? Like, it's gonna take a while before those upgrades are finished. Zerglings are desperately trying to get through this wall. Battery Overcharge has already been activated, but obviously that only lasts for a little bit. It's really critical right here for Reynor that he does not let those units through that wall. If the Zerglings can get a wraparound on the Stalkers, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. Blink is, well, still slowly chipping away. In order to make Stalkers, you also do need to have a Cybernetics core. So if the Cyber Core here falls, that would also be a little bit of a problem. Spine Crawlers at this point are done, and Dark is going to start poking away at this wall on the side of the Protoss. This is mostly a skill check right here from Dark. He's like, hey, I've heard you're pretty good at Protoss, but are you capable of defending a relatively standard cheese, right? Are you capable of defending this sort of shenanigans? Keep in mind, these Spine Crawlers can be transfused about 100 times over. There's no +1 melee or anything like that. And obviously, this is a map with a proxy, or like, not a proxy, like an in-base expo too. So I'm not entirely sure if this is the best map for a cheese like this. But anyways, apparently Reynor is gonna let these structures fall at the front. Yeah, and he's just slowly trying to expand his way back into the main base. Battery Overcharge number 2, activated already. Queens are running a little bit lower on energy, but so far it seems that the majority of those Zerg units will live. That being said, the same can be said for the Stalkers too, right? We've seen the Zerglings getting picked off. Yeah, the Zerglings are actually falling. Getting rid of that one Nydus Worm in the back of the in-base expo, that would have, you know, that would have been a disaster, right? Or there was another Nydus Worm right over here. I love the fact that the Void Ray is still patrolling back and forth in that area. +1 at this point is done. Blink, of course, also done here for Protoss. And honestly, it kind of looks to me like Zerg is running out of steam. Yeah, at this point, the Stalker count is plenty high. Good Blink Stalker micro as well, keeping quite a few of those bad boys alive. And it looks like, well, Reynor defends that pretty easily. Huh. In the meantime, Oracle's trying to be annoying on the other side of the map. Killing 4 drones, actually. Not bad at all. Interestingly enough, those units weren't actually used. Yeah, they weren't actually used right there to help out with the main defense. And neither was that Void Ray. Alright. One of the problems, though, that the Protoss is running into right now is that there's creep at his front door. Yeah, so Reynor was thinking about going for another Nexus. Not possible until that creep disappears. Now, luckily, the Oracle does have that Revelation ability. So there's no observers or anything available, but at the very least, the Oracle can, well, provide Revelation, I suppose. It can be a detector. Zerg, in the meantime, though, happily expanding. 4th hatchery coming up as well for Dark. Sure, he got shut down, but wasn't the biggest commitment in the world either, right? His economy was still pretty good. I mean, at this point, though, resource-wise, I would say that this is definitely a Protoss advantage. But it's not like Reynor can just push across the map and go win. And I think he's reading this game correctly. It can be easy to look at this and be like, I defend it, let's go kill him. And then, well, you have to fight on creep on their side of the map, you get surrounded, and it's still GG. Yeah, so Reynor instead is going to go for a 4th Nexus. A Spine Crawler cheese. Classic Dark move, by the way. It's almost disrespectful, right? Okay. It's like when you have to play against your little brother in a tournament and you're like, okay, bro, listen. See if you can hold this. Well, turns out the little brother can hold it just fine. Zergling's getting quite a bit of damage in, though. The problem is, normally at this point in a game of StarCraft 2, in a Protoss versus Zerg in the current meta, these Zerglings would have +1 melee, right? But those were just the leftover links. Instead, right now, okay, Dark is gonna go into Roaches with +1/+1, or I guess +2/+1. So that's armor, and then also the missile upgrade, and then he's adding on some Infestors. Infestors have an ability called Fungal Growth. It deals damage over time, it slows units down, but it also inhibits movement abilities. So if you land a big Fungal Growth on a group of Stalkers, they can't actually blink away. Which is, yeah, pretty insane. It's very, very useful. So Dark is gonna go for skill check number 2. Is Reynor capable of defending against some Infestor play? Alright. Zealots, though, are moving around. Creep is, by the way, still over here, right? That one tumor has been moving around for a while. Reynor not apparently convinced he can squeeze out an Observer here to get rid of that creep once and for all. Instead, oh no, he does already have an Observer out. I was going to say. Instead, he's going to have to use Revelation over and over and over again, but luckily for him, that is not the case. Because relying on just that one Oracle is kind of tricky. You really do want to have some energy available for stasis wards and potential supplemental damage too. Neural Parasite. Hell yeah, let's go, Dark. Fungal! Oh, good blink. Very important blink. That's why we're playing on the Korean server for this sort of match. Because if that was a, you know, normally Korea versus Europe would be played on an NA server, right? So the ping is equally bad for both players. That would have been GG, I believe. Because getting like, I don't know, 10 Stalkers? Pretty sure that there would be a chain fungal, right? There, yeah, could have been game-ending damage there by Mr. Dark, but Reynor blinked away just barely in the nick of time. Revelation reveals where all of those Stalkers are at. Nice split right here by Reynor. There's also Storm available here for the Protoss player in red. That's going to be pretty sweet. It's not ideal on Roaches and Ravagers, but obviously, once again, supplemental damage. Can we get rid of those creep tumors, please? Where's that Observer? I think the Observer probably just got destroyed somehow. Anyhow, maybe it got caught up in a couple battles. Maybe the Queen's got it. I'm not exactly sure what ended up happening. Nice Fungal Growth, though. Yeah, it's going to be hard to now follow up against that Fungal Growth, right? Just because we have a lot of damage. Nice Corrosive Battles as well, though, connecting with a bunch of the Templar. It's a very close battle here. Is there enough for the Protoss player to go through this? Queens are pulled away from the hatcheries too. A lot of them have energy from earlier on into the game, so they're transfusing this army back up to full. Immortals shooting away every time they can, and there come the Zealot reinforcements. A lot of these Zerg units are actually rather juicy targets here for the Zealots. Alright. Reynor backs off, knowing very well that there's going to be a lot of reinforcements popping out of those Zerg cocoons very, very shortly. Dark has, in the meantime, taken a base over here. Ideally, I think with a... Okay, yeah, I was going to say, as a follow-up here, you probably want to go either Brute Lords or Lurkers. I think Lurkers are indeed a fantastic choice, because Reynor is very much so stuck on a ground-based army. And both Lurkers and Brute Lords are really good when it comes to stopping that ground-based army. So he's adding on Hydralisk right now. I think that's a fantastic choice. Infestors right here on the high ground. So Infestors cannot use Fungal Growth while burrowed, but they can use Neural Parasite. So if they have enough energy, they can actually, well, for example, neural those Immortals, and then the Immortals can start plowing through all of those Stalkers very easily. Since, as we've seen, there's not a lot of detection available for Reynor, it would actually be very hard for him to stop that. I wouldn't mind seeing another few Observers, maybe even the Observer Speed upgrade, but I guess at this point, yeah, Protoss doesn't really have that level of income. Although, once again, we see this as a... I think that was a Prism. We see this as a theme from the Protoss player here. Reynor is once again at above 90 workers. So, despite the fact that he's been attacked a lot, he likes making a lot of those units as well. Okay, apparently the Archon is going to be turning against the Protoss there for a moment. But he's a big fan of just making a very large amount of probes. And it allows him, I guess, to take those relatively inefficient trades. Once again, some decent storms, though. Yeah, only a couple of Lurkers available. There's a few more right here on the high ground. I don't think I like this trade all too much for Reynor, but once again, it's mostly like... Okay, most of the time when we see a Protoss player, this would be 70 workers versus 70 workers, right? So these sort of trades don't really line up very well. However, in this particular game, Reynor, and this is a theme in every single Protoss game that I've casted of his, he has got that economical advantage. And it seems that Zerg players don't realize it. Or at the very least, they don't normally practice against Protoss players that have that many workers. So normally those traits, I would be critical of them. I think I am still a little bit critical of it right now, but it definitely is easier to replace the units that you're losing when you have 90 workers than when you have like 65 to 75. Anyways, another Nexus coming up in the bottom left. Stargate number 2 coming up. Fleet Beacon building. Second Cyber Core 2. I think that this is going to be a mass air transition here from Reynor very shortly. Now, with enough lurkers, Dark will be able to shut down that ground army. Obviously, though, the problem with lurkers is that they can't shoot up, right? That would be ridiculous if they could. So, if you have only lurkers here, it's going to be incredibly hard to actually get rid of those either Tempest or Carriers or both. So, already a +1 flyer attack is coming. We see the Forging... Or the Forge right here upgrading the shield weapons too. Even the 6 o'clock base is being acquired. So Dark probably thinks he's being quite a clever boy right here by making a ton of those lurkers and countering his opponent's ground army hard. He doesn't realize how much economy he's actually playing against. Look at the scouting here. Oh my god. That was the Dark announcer that he's using right there. Dark at this point hasn't scouted in a long time. So finally he's seen another base. And I guess when you see that little red dot on the minimap at the 6 o'clock position, it's safe to assume that all the other bases on the left side of the map are also taken. But I wonder if that was a bit of a fright right there from Dark. He doesn't really... Yeah, he doesn't really have anything to aggressively push with, right? So he needs to get something done. He cannot really allow this Protoss player to just mine more than him. So far, I would say that the traits here... Yeah, they are pretty back and forth. And obviously, at that point, the player with more economy will eventually win because they will just simply have more money, right? If it keeps being a wash in the fights. All right, lurkers right here on the prowl. Ooh. I thought Dark might want to try to take out one of those outer bases, but that's not what Dark is trying to do. Dark instead is just trying to go straight towards the natural. I mean, at this point, keep in mind, there's no Skytools units out just yet. This is an incredibly hard position to break. All of the lurkers are gonna burrow. This is just a ground army right now for Protoss. Reynor needs to break this somehow, some way. He's setting up a massive flank with all of the units. He's gonna have to have one hell of an engagement in order to break through this. Protoss units, though, coming from every angle. Warpins right there in the natural as well, creating like a full 360 surround. Nydus Worm to try and get those leftover Zerg units out of there. And what I thought was gonna be a disaster, and what would have been a disaster if Reynor came in from one of those angles instead, turned out to be a pretty excellent trade right there for the Protoss. Coming in from 4 angles at once, storms on all of those units, and, well, a lucky coincidence right there. Trading out those units will now also open up supply for the Protoss to transition towards carriers. +2 attacks are coming up for those flyers, +1 armor, already researching. We're gonna continue fighting as well. There's still a lot of lurkers available at home. But hey, Reynor is happy if the Zerg player here is sitting at home. The base in the bottom right got the Knight again as well. Am I seeing this correctly? Is this Reynor smashing Dark with his Protoss? Admittedly, Dark tried winning the game with a couple of relatively cheap tricks a couple of times, right? There have been a few moves that he's made in this game that are almost, you know, a disrespectful one, right? It's like, okay, are you gonna be able to hold this? What about this? What about this? And it turns out, yeah, all of those are held relatively smoothly. Protoss here finds himself in a pretty good spot. Now also, Dark wasn't scouting there for a very long time. He didn't know about the base on the left side of the map for quite a while. Anyways, apparently this expansion here may very well be sacrificed in exchange for one of the Zerg bases. Again, at this point, Protoss is maxed out, so they can't actually add on more units. So you need to lose a bunch of this army if you want to go into additional carriers. Wouldn't be surprised if those idle Stargates will be utilized here in just a moment. Storm right here on top of the Zerg, on top of the Zerg lurkers. My god, this is a very ugly little engagement, but Reynor is making a move through it. Queen's on the ramp, also in a lot of trouble. Okay. About 20 supply got traded out there. Yep, and additional carriers are immediately queued up. This is the first time that the carriers are spotted. Sure, Hydras are technically an anti-air unit, but you're gonna need more, you know, than 1-to-1 ratio of carriers to Hydras if you want to beat it right here as a Zerg. Queen's desperately trying to help out as well. Lurkers here, pushing back this army. It looks like maybe finally Dark can catch up. Nope, he cannot. Not a ton of interceptors, right? I like this little move, actually, from Reynor a lot. Most of the time, we see carriers showing as soon as, like, they're maxed out. But in this particular case, Reynor's like, yo, I've got carriers. What are you going to do about it? This is going to give the Zerg a little bit of time to respond. But honestly, what do you do here as Zerg? He's got very little economy in this grand scheme of things. Look at the income advantage. The gold base right now is up and running. Ideally, as a Zerg right now, you would transition towards a mass, like, Liberator. No, you want to switch to mass Corruptor. But there's no way that Dark can really afford Corruptors here. Look at his gas count. He just doesn't have enough. Instead, he's going to be forced to make Spore Crawlers and, I guess, Hydralisks. Couple more Infestors coming up as well. Okay, some Neuroparasites could help. Even a Microbial Shroud might come out. But at this point, this is... yeah, at this point, this is definitely Reynor's game to lose. He's moving forward once again with the army that he's got. This time around, it's 9 carriers in total. More of them are trailing behind. A lot of Lurkers are still underground, so they're going to try and just slow down the advancement of this Protoss ground army. A good storm right there underneath the Microbial Shroud. Dealing a lot of damage to the Zerg. Another expansion falls. We do see a fungal growth. Okay, so those Infestors just popped out of the cocoon. They had to get into the battle right away. Storm once again, though, on the Microbial Shroud. I don't know if it's underneath or on top of the Microbial Shroud, but it doesn't really matter. Maybe a bunch of the interceptors fell. Maybe a couple of the carriers got picked off, but Reynor is trading aggressively. His Protoss reinforcements in the bottom right-hand corner take care of that newly acquired base. And it's indeed Reynor who obtains the victory in this Protoss versus Zerg over Dark. Insane. Hey, before you close out this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you.